What Don Lemon came in and did with his cohorts, planned in advance, had smacks of the Ku Klux Klan, where they organized, they orchestrated things in order to stop other folks from exercising their liberties. That's what needs to be brought out. And I think there is enough there for the DOJ to go after these folks and prosecute them.
And the FACE Act, by the way, is designed to protect the rights of people seeking their reproductive rights to be protected. And so that people, for a religious reason, cannot just use religion to break into women's reproductive health centers, right? So how they are stretching either of these laws to apply to people who protested in a church over the behavior or the perceived behavior of a religious leader is beyond me.
Okay. So there you saw they're commenting on that. Joining us to break this down is attorney Jonathan Alexander of the Liberty Counsel. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you so
much. How
are
you tonight?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. We are so excited to have you with us. This is your first time on Pop and Politics. Before we really get involved in this, please let the audience know where they can find you and any information or anything you'd like to share with the audience.
Well, you can find me, as you can find Bible-believing Christians, every Sunday morning at 11 at church. At church. Zeal for the house of God consumes me. I echo all of your comments just now that this is outrageous, this intimidation, this assault, this harassment that we saw levied against the people of God for just wanting to gather together and worship. It's beyond the pale. It's exactly why our founders wanted to establish a place here on this continent so they can worship God freely. And we anticipate and expect that government will help secure those rights. So I join you in that anger. Liberty Counsel you can find us on lc.org. We're a constitutional litigation firm. We work all over the country. The last time that we really had to push in order for the rights of believers to be respected, or probably the more recent time, was during COVID, where these same agitators, gripped by fear, gripped by political maneuverings, locked churches, shut them down, said that they were no longer essential, broke the sacred barrier that we've established around churches in our country. And so, 5 years later, downstream, you can have a Don Lemon and his cohorts decide, well, this place isn't essential. This place isn't sacred. This place can't be protected. We can use it as a platform for our political stage. So we fight in the same way that you have articulated. The zeal for the Lord consumes us when we see what they've done to our fellow brothers and sisters there in that church.
Wow, I love it. I love it. All right. So my question for you is, what does the FACE Act apply here? And if so, how?
It absolutely does. Signed into law in 1994, and the debate went back and forth as to what it should include. As that so-called Attorney General was saying, Ellison, it obviously has been used in the past, as the writing says, to talk about reproductive freedoms and access to healthcare. It's almost in the title itself. And so we've done a lot in the past to try to rein in the abuse of that law. But there is a provision in that law that was rightly fought for and placed in by a Catholic at the time, Ted Kennedy, that said, well, you have to protect churches too. The Catholic Church at the time, specifically in Massachusetts, where he was from, are some of the strongest anti-abortion advocates that we have, some of the strongest pro-life advocates that we have. And you'll remember right after the overturning of Roe and Wade, you had folks go to Catholic churches in New York and in other parts of the country and try to desecrate their altars in order to promote so-called reproductive rights and abortion rights. So in 94, when they put that language in, when it was passed and signed into law by Clinton, church was in there. Religious facilities could not be intimidated or disrupted, or you could not coerce people from not being able to express their fundamental right, in this case, the fundamental right to worship God on a Sunday morning. So that's within the text, and law enforcement, the government, DOJ has everything they need in front of them to prosecute those that were persecuting the church this past Sunday.
Thanks, Jonathan, for that. I was going to ask something similar, but I'll ask my second question regarding public versus private property in relations to churches. I've heard many people online say, this was a public gathering. They were invited in. At what point does it become, is it public or private property if the public is invited in? Or at some point, if you are asked to leave, are you trespassing if you don't? Or how do all of those kind of parts play in?
You're absolutely right. A way to think of it is, if a church is inviting folks to come in as they do, come as you are, there's a difference that the church retains in its ability to allow things to go on within its midst. On the one hand, it can have a spaghetti dinner approach. The spaghetti dinner approach is something that they put on for the community to come in, sort of a potluck thing. But the Bible studies and the worship services, despite inviting people in, think of it as inviting people into your living room. This is our ordained service. This is our moment between us, each other, and our Savior. And you're going to recognize that under the law. The Constitution recognizes that right of that type of worship under the law. And anytime it's been challenged, even most recently when the IRS asked the question whether or not pastors can speak about public candidates and political candidates from behind the pulpit, they once again had to realize that, no, this is a living room setting. This is a family meeting. This is what we do amongst ourselves. We'll invite you to come in so long as you'll apply under the rules. And most churches, and every church should have a constitution where they write out what allows for membership, what allows for the use of the service, also what is described as things outside of the service that you can be removed for. Certainly what Don Lemon did and those agitators that came in are beyond the pale of any invitation that a church has given to them. And so, yes, they are a private entity. They're not the ones that would enforce the freedom of the press. Don Lemon said, I was just doing a journalist's work. No, Congress can't make a law against the freedom of the press. So it's not up to the church to ensure that Don Lemon has the freedom of the press. It is up to the church to exercise their own rights of religion, of worship. And that's what they were doing that day. What Don Lemon came in and did with his cohorts, planned in advance, had smacks of the Ku Klux Klan, where they organized, they orchestrated things in order to stop other folks from exercising their liberties. That's what needs to be brought out. And I think there's enough there for the DOJ to go after these folks and prosecute them.
That was going to be my question, Jonathan. So just across socials, what you've been hearing is that Harmeet Dillon and Pam Bondi are going to go after Don Lemon using the Ku Klux Klan Act, which I thought was, a little bit of justice because, he fancies himself some sort of Black journalistic hero that should be held in high esteem. And to see him even mentioned in the same sentence with the Ku Klux Klan Act is just a little bit of eating ice cream in bed at night. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of deliciousness. But can you tell us more about that act and how this would apply to him if it does?
Yeah, absolutely. If you break down the First Amendment generally, because it's been thrown around, by Don Lemon and by us as well, saying that we have the right. It says Congress can't stop us from exercising our right to the press. Congress can't stop us from exercising our right to worship. It applies to the states via the 14th Amendment. So it's going to apply in this situation. But here's a private actor. So it's not necessarily government stopping these people from worshiping. What can we do to make sure that there can't be an organized band of individuals that they could be acting for government, they could be acting on their own, but what stops one group or one faction from stopping another's expression of their liberty? And so the Ku Klux Klan Act was enacted to say, no, those same rights that government recognizes in those Bill of Rights, those same things that government is not allowed to do, private actors and private citizens can't do against other citizens as well. And they named it the Klan Act because that's what the Klan did. They organized in order to limit the rights of African Americans in the Deep South from worshiping in some instances with the bombings that they did in churches, but also from just living out their civil liberties and their constitutional rights. So they placed that label on there saying, hey, yes, we're going to recognize that there are certain things that government can never encroach on, that being religious liberty. And at the same time, we're going to say private actors, you in your own right, you cannot band together and encroach on those same liberties. And so that's the law that they are armed and equipped with to go after Don Lemon and his cohorts.
Because when KJ's question and you answered regarding COVID, I'm going to take a little, quote unquote, devil's advocate. During COVID, when churches were closed, do you think this attitude of, I guess I'm going to call it this pacifist attitude in 2026. Do you think this kind of is a play on or a consequence of Christians not pushing back during COVID when our churches were made to close? Do you think this may have a little bit of contributory factor to that?
I think absolutely right. Our laws and our liberties, our duties as they run together, and it's like a muscle. In order to have this liberty, in order to have this duty of worship, you got to keep exercising the muscle. And the moment you don't, it becomes atrophy. You lose the pulse. You lose sort of the rhythm of what it means to look at a threat to your rights. COVID came in and we lost our perception of what it meant to truly have that right to worship. And we allowed governments all across this country to shut us down. And we put our weights down. We put our hands down and allowed them to encroach. And the rest of the world was watching. They saw that, man, maybe these Christians are fine just in their silos, or maybe they're fine not singing or chanting or sharing communion with one another. Maybe their religious liberties and practices aren't that serious to them, such that they think that 6 years down the road, they can come into a church of God, a place that throughout the entire American history has been known to be sacred. It's the one place where you'll find the majority of Americans still to this day at the 11 a.m. hour worshiping God. I'm thinking of what we just went through as an African-American community. All of our churches, and some were good, some were a little iffy, but we were all singing total praise. We were all remembering Richard Smallwood, because that's what we do. We worship, we come together, and we fix our eyes on Christ. That's why he spared us as a nation. That's why he spared us as a people up until this point. If we're not willing to continue to pick up that weight and exercise that muscle, then that lets the devil, that lets the other side know that they can come in and define what our terms are. But no, our terms do not come from man. Our terms come from God, and it's to him only does the glory, the honor, and the worship of our Sunday morning service belong.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. My question for you, my last question for you, Jonathan, is, I mean, when I hear you speak, I'm hearing it as a Christian, not as a Black woman, Christian, not as a Republican, not as a conservative, as a Christian. But what we just saw and what we've seen over the last several months has become partisan. And something like this, looking at what happened, all Christians, no matter if you're conservative or liberal, whether you're Republican or Democrat, should be enraged by what we saw. What can you say to people on the left that are looking at this through the lens of leftism, through the lens of partisanship, when this should be something that enrages all of us, no matter your politics?
Yeah, look at who you're allying with. You look across the world right now in Nigeria, Boko Haram and Muslims are operating out of the same playbook. Let's find the Christians where they're worshiping and let's go and attack them. So that's who the left is allying with by not speaking out against us and not being offended by this unique space in our culture that our nation has carved out that is sacred and belongs to God. That's what ought to enrage even those that may not believe in God, but understand that there is some moral quality to my neighbor leaving every Sunday morning and going to church as opposed to going to the casino or the bar. It makes a difference for your neighborhood. It certainly made a difference in my own heart and in our own lives. And any leftist, any person, any American should be able to look at the Christian, look at the church, look at the faithfulness that God has provided to this country because of the witness of the church and say, I may not believe the same way, but I like what they do. I appreciate what they do, and I want them to be able to keep doing it. That's all we asked as Americans, and it's certainly the reason we have it as our I like that you call it 1A. That's why we have it as our First Amendment, because that's what's going to preserve this country.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We definitely have to have you back. Definitely, you gave a lot of clarity on this, especially legal clarity and Christian conservative clarity. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Folks, this is Jonathan Alexander. He is with the Liberty Counsel, and we certainly will have you back on, Jonathan. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Yes, indeed. All right, folks. Again, as you all come in, hit that like button, that helps to get this video out in front of a wider audience, and subscribe. We are trying to grow this community. We still want to hit 250,000 subscribers. That is our goal. We only can do it with your help. So please hit that like button, share this video, post it on your social media, send it in a DM or a text message, and subscribe.